Former co-worker to death in her bed has been sentenced to 36 years behind bars.
But Celeste Mano's furious mother says that's not enough.
Celeste Mano's story began innocently with attention from a co-worker named Lou Nater, who was 16 years her senior. Despite her pilot rejections, Lou became increasingly obsessed. After being fired, his harassment escalated from persistent messages to stalking her home. Celeste sought police help multiple times but was dismissed. Eventually, Lou broke into her home, leading to a tragic outcome. This incident highlights the dangers of obsessive behavior and the inadequacies in legal protections against stalking. Let's closely examine the tragic case of Celeste Mano. Celeste was born on November 30, 1997 in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Her parents, Eggy Dero and Tommy Mano, raised her alongside her older brother named Alessandro. Some sources say that Tony divorced his first wife when the children were young and remarried, but he remained in contact with his older children, providing financial support and staying involved in their lives. Celeste was very outgoing, energetic and friendly when she was in school. She played sports and danced, led the cheerleading squad, and had big plans for her future. At first, she wanted to be a lawyer, so she enrolled at the esteemed University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, as her studies came to an end, she decided that law was boring, so she started studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, Celeste was hired by a sizable company that sold a variety of goods on e-commerce platforms. She was smart and talented, so she picked things up quickly, completed her tasks successfully, and moved up the corporate ladder. In less than a few years, Celeste went from a simple call center worker to the head of a whole department. Celeste was also extremely attractive on the outside and had a perfect body. She even competed in the university beauty pageant and placed in the top 3. Celeste had a lot of admirers and was used to receiving a lot of attention from men from an early age, but she was picky about who she dated. Lou Nater, a co-worker 16 years older than Celeste Mano. He was instantly captivated by her when she started working at their office. Lou was a quiet and introverted man. He had held a low-level job for many years and showed no ambition for advancement. Celeste was being friendly and polite. She didn't want to hurt his feelings, so she gently declined his persistent advances. Lou's attention was awkward and annoying, but Celeste remained composed, hoping he would lose interest. Despite her polite rejections, Lou saw her resistance as a challenge and continued his pursuit, making the situation increasingly uncomfortable for Celeste. Lou persisted through the years, becoming genuinely fixated on the young beauty, a fact that was noticed by all. One day, Celeste opened up to a close friend and co-worker that she would never even entertain the idea of dating Lou for several reasons. Firstly, he was strange and completely unpredictable. Secondly, she had never been attracted to men who lacked ambition and life goals. Thirdly, the significant age gap also played a part. And finally, she felt sorry for her admirer, as despite his best efforts, he had no chance. During his fruitless attempts to gain his colleagues' affection and attention, Lou forgot all about his own work responsibilities. He had never been a particularly diligent worker, but now he just stopped carrying out his direct functions. His productivity fell and senior management became unhappy with the situation. Lou was given 3 warnings and reprimands before being fired in the early autumn of 2019. He was extremely upset about this development, and as he packed his things in the office, it appeared as though he was going to cry. Celeste, on the other hand, felt conflicted about what had happened. On the one hand, she was relieved that the constant suitor would finally leave her life and stop pestering her with his advances. On the other hand, she felt guilty, thinking that she had contributed to this outcome. Celeste was the department manager. She thanked the fired worker for his years of service, escorted him to the building exit, and tried to cheer him up by giving him a pat on the shoulder and sincerely wishing him luck. But soon enough, this innocuous gesture proved to be fatal and the source of Lou's belief that they could work things out. He thought that Celeste was just afraid to start an office romance because she was his boss. Feeling overwhelmed, Lou kissed Celeste on the cheek without warning. An awkward silence ensued. Stunned by his boldness, Celeste did not know how to respond. She just turned around and hurried back into the office building without a word. Lou thought that Celeste did indeed have feelings for him and that he should not give up. A few days after the firing, Lou made a social media account, found Celeste's profile, and added her as a friend. At first, she thought there would be no harm in accepting, But after he started nagging her with requests to go out, she tried to decline politely at first, and eventually she just blocked him. The next day, the Lou sent her another friend request from a newly created profile, which she tried to ignore until he started complimenting her appearance and figure in the photos, and remarking on how perfect a couple they would make. Celeste then tried to change her profile settings so that only friends could message or comment on her posts. A week later, at a family get-together, she berated her family for being pursued so much, and told her family that weird thing that happened the day he got fired. Her family listened, but they all assumed it was a one-time thing, that the unwelcome admirer would grow bored and leave her life. So Lou didn't have Celeste's personal phone number when they worked together. They only spoke via work channels. However, she started getting weird love messages from an unknown number, and she knew right away who it was from. The admirer sent her love poems he had written, complimented her on her looks, and tried to talk her into going out once more. Celeste only took the stalker's call once, trying to have a serious conversation to convince him that they couldn't work together, and to convince him to stop pursuing her. But instead of listening, the man repeated how nice her voice was and how happy he was that she had finally answered the phone. Subsequently, she attempted to block the pursuer, but he kept calling from a different number each time. Finally, she changed her number, but within a week, Lou discovered it somehow, and the phone calls persisted. In an attempt to shield herself, Celeste tried to ignore Lou for about 6 months by blocking his numbers and fictitious social media pages, from ignoring messages and trying to go about her regular life. But the messages persisted, and now Lou did not say that he wanted to meet with her. Instead, he started describing his irrational, intimate fantasies about what he would do with her. But that was not even the worst of it. It turned out that Lou began following her from work to home, learning where she lived. Celeste didn't realize at first that Lou was now present in her life, not just in messages, but was literally trailing her every move. She occasionally glimpsed him near her home, but each time she convinced herself that it was her imagination. When Celeste finally realized that she was not mistaken and that the stalker, with his maniacal obsession, was indeed following her, she decided to seek police protection. She wanted law enforcement to issue a special order prohibiting the stalker from approaching her and her home. However, the officers were indifferent to her request, if not outright mocking. According to the police, the man had done nothing illegal or reprehensible, as writing poems or expressing explicit fantasies in text messages is not forbidden and is not punishable. Celeste could not provide evidence that Lou was following her and lurking near her home, so she was simply asked to leave the precinct and not hinder the police from catching real criminals. The long-awaited restraining order took another 6 months. Celeste continued to suffer from the relentless harassment of her former colleague during workdays. A different officer took her statement, taking the situation more seriously and even surprised at his colleague's lack of concern. He advised her to go to court right away, where a restraining order was issued against Lou, notifying him that he could no longer call, approach, or try to contact her in any other way. Clearly, the man did not anticipate this turn of events, and he vanished from Celeste's sight for a few days. She was relieved, but not for long, because less than a month later, she started getting messages from numbers she did not recognize, in which Lou begged her to retract her statement and to remove the restraining order because he thought it was interfering with their romantic relationship. After receiving multiple messages, Celeste went straight to the police, claiming that her stalker had broken the order and that he would now have to deal with the consequences. So Lou was fined and told that if he did not leave the young woman alone, he might wind up in jail. Lou did not show up for nearly 2 months after that, at which point the young woman decided that he had finally stopped. In September 2020, Celeste met Chris Reedsdale, a young man who was only a year older than her. They quickly discovered that they shared a lot of interests, goals, and perspectives on life, which led to the development of a romantic relationship. Celeste told her new boyfriend about the harassment she had received from her former admirer, and admitted that she was still anxious even though he had not made himself known. Chris made great efforts to show his girlfriend care and attention, going above and beyond to make her feel secure and worry-free. Once again, the next few weeks passed peacefully, and the former admirer stopped showing up or attempting to get in touch with Celeste. She was happy, spending all of her free time with Chris, and it seemed she was no longer worried about Lou possibly bursting into her life or harming her in any way. In early November, Celeste invited her new boyfriend to a family dinner to introduce him to her parents and brother. Celeste's choice was well received by her family. They immediately got along well, and her mother even joked that her girl was now in safe hands that would protect her. On November 15, 2020, the enamored couple went out on a date. While they were enjoying each other's company at the cafe, Celeste suggested taking a selfie, which turned out romantic. Celeste liked this frame so much that she decided to use it as her social media profile picture, signaling that things were getting serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page, along with a heartfelt caption about how much he loved this girl and would do anything to keep her eyes sparkling with happiness like in this picture. Sadly, this date was their last date. Celeste spent about an hour talking about her boyfriend with her mother in the kitchen on their final date night before going to bed because she had to wake up early the next day for work. On Monday, November 16, 2020, at around 4:00 a.m., Celeste's mother, Eggy, was awakened by the sound of breaking glass but didn't immediately understand what was happening. She then heard suspicious noises, banging, screaming, and commotion, and her first thought was that they were coming from the street, but she later realized they were inside the house. Eggy bolted from her bed, threw on her robe, and ran to her daughter's room. When she opened the door, she saw in the dim light someone literally jumping away from Celeste's bed before escaping through the broken window. Eggy turned on the light and saw, horrifyingly, what lay ahead of her. Her daughter Celeste was lying in a pool of her own blood, covered in cuts and tiny shards of broken glass. She was gasping for air, struggling to breathe, and her eyes were wide open. Her mother called 911 and attempted to stem the deep bleeding wounds on her body until the paramedics arrived, but it was too late to save her. By the time the police and doctors arrived, Celeste had already passed away. Later, the medical examiners discovered that she had sustained more than 20 deep stabbing wounds, the most serious of which was to her heart. The suspect used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, and Celeste tried to defend herself, as indicated by numerous cuts on her arms. After analyzing the situation and comparing the scene of the incident with Eggy's testimony, the police concluded that the attacker took less than 3 minutes to break into the victim's room through the window and carry out the attack before her mother entered. Eggy was asked if her daughter had enemies, and she could only think of one: Lou, who had been pursuing her compulsively for more than a year, calling and texting her. Her friends and co-workers also confirmed this information. The suspect left numerous bloody fingerprints at the scene, and his hand was injured enough that DNA was recovered from a fence he had to jump over on his way out. Lou was arrested the same day and initially vehemently denied his involvement in the incident, insisting that he loved Celeste and would never harm her. However, soon after, forensic results confirmed that the bloody fingerprints found in the victim's room and on the fence were his. Law enforcement also pointed to the restraining order against approaching the Celeste, which he had violated. It was imperative to detain and question Lou immediately as the primary suspect in the case, and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Furthermore, it was discovered that the night before the tragedy, Lou had made purchases at a nearby hardware store that included a large knife and a hammer. He was caught on camera paying for his purchases at the checkout, and he used the hammer to smash through the window of the house and the knife to kill the evidence against Lou was overwhelming, as evidenced by his extensive surveillance of the victim over a long period of time, and his near-complete knowledge of her personal history. However, the young woman's social media post with her new boyfriend served as the final straw for Lou, who then went to a store, bought a knife and a hammer, and under cover of darkness, went to Celeste's home to take her life. Lou's actions were viewed as intentional, premeditated criminal activity. But Lou's behavior was so inconsistent that it begged questions about his mental health. He was almost 39 years old. He had never married, he lived with his parents, he had very few friends, and he had never held down a job for very long. He was also described as introverted. Lou also had a biological brother who was incarcerated at the time for a crime. The victim's family was outraged and infuriated by the accused attorney's argument that his client needed professional help rather than imprisonment, and that Lou, despite his attempts to pretend to be insane, would not be allowed to go free. Psychiatric experts interviewed Lou and evaluated his behavior, concluding that Lou did have mental health issues, but he was fully aware of his actions at the time of the crime, and he had planned the details in advance. 3 years after the Celeste tragic death, in the fall of 2023, the criminal faced court. Lou attempted to avoid a conviction for intentional criminal action, claiming mental illness. He spent most of this time in a mental health facility. In court, Lou appeared calm and detached, admitting guilt, but insisting his intent was only to win the girl's love. Despite his defense, the jury found Lou guilty on all counts, sentencing him to 36 years in prison with possible parole after 30 years. Celeste's parents repeatedly stated that their daughter had sought police protection from Lou in 2020, but her complaint was dismissed since harassment laws did not cover phone or internet stalking. Aggie Dero, Celeste's mother, determined to protect others, she collaborated with lawyers and activists for 3 years to propose Celeste's law, aiming to criminalize online stalking. Although most recommendations were rejected, but changes were made to restrict access to private information on social media, and severe stalking could now result in restraining orders, though criminal liability remains absent. Celeste's law is yet to be passed. What do you think of our video? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from me again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go. Thanks for watching.